Can you talk about that resistance a little bit that you were talking about in War of Art? Because I actually just picked up the book last night. We didn't plan this. We didn't talk about the War of Art for
Mhm.
listeners. I literally picked it up. It was sitting on my bookcase and started reading it. And I got through the parts where he's talking about the resistance and how sometimes in your life people who are also facing resistance will try to pull you down to your level, like stop chasing your purpose, basically. Can you talk a little bit about what that book meant to you and what you took from it?
Sure. So, well, it's a fantastic read, and it's also super short, so I recommend it. Like everyone should get it. But really, like in any creative project, it's really funny how the biggest hurdle is actually like a mental hurdle and not a physical one. And I've noticed this like in every creative project I pursued, whether it's like creating the website. It's really not that hard to like sign up for Squarespace. It's free, and you could just kind of move things around and kind of build your website. And same thing when it comes to like writing articles. It's not that hard to open up your computer and start typing. What's hard is to get over
Hmm.
that hurdle and say, I'm a writer or I'm a blogger or I'm a podcaster. And that's what like I also tell people, anyone starting a podcast, one of the hardest things is to say, I'm going to be a podcaster. It's not that hard to, call people up or email them and be like, hey, you want to come on my podcast and talk to them? That comes pretty naturally. The hard part is convincing yourself. And there's something that Stephen Pressfield, he calls a resistance. So it's this thing that keeps like pulling you back. It tells you like, no, you can't do this. No, you're not good enough. No, you're not the type of person to do this kind of stuff. And sometimes, well, most of the times it is mental and it's that self-talk in your own head. But other times it's like external. So it's like a lot of people, like when I started Alex and Books, like I'm literally just sharing like book recommendations and book advice. And a couple of friends were like, that's stupid. Don't do that. It's a waste of time. And it's like I'm trying to do something here, and like all I'm literally doing is like sharing book recommendations. So like nothing super crazy, and it's like I'm getting resistance from like a couple close friends, a couple other people that think it's like a silly idea, a waste of time, and then I'm also facing that self talk, which is probably the hardest thing you have to overcome. And it's just a great book about you. Like if you want to beat that resistance, it's really come down to like taking small steps in the right direction and believing in yourself. Like half the battle of anything is just believing you could do it. There's that great quote. It's like the man that thinks he can, the man that thinks he can't are both right. So what it comes down
Yeah.
to is, believing in yourself and kind of pursuing what you want to do. And like, what's the worst thing that can happen? I start a website and like it doesn't get any views, or I start a podcast and that not that many people listen to it. It's like you aren't like physically injured. You're not putting your physical self in like harm's way. It's all mental, and it's like you
Yeah.
just have to get over that hurdle and just start creating.
I heard you say on your episode with James Altucher that with the podcast, you had a plan to start 3 episodes, and then if people liked it, you would continue on from there. And obviously, people liked it because I believe you're 14 or 15 in now that you've released. What have you learned as a podcaster since you started that journey a few months ago?
Yeah, so that was also like a big hurdle, and it was mostly like mental because I've been working for a podcasting company for almost 2 years, and I've been wanting to start my own podcast for over a year. And I bought the equipment and everything, and it was just sitting there. And like each day, I would look at it and be like, I know I want to do this, I know I should do this, but I just couldn't get over that hurdle. And I ended up just like you said, I emailed 3 people. I'm like, do you want to come on my podcast? And they all said yes. And like I'm like, all right, well, now I can't let them down. I have to figure out how to podcast. I have to figure out how to record, how to edit. So it's like kind of pulling the trigger and then figuring out how to do it. And then like another important lesson I learned is like successful people, like especially like the authors I have on my podcast, they're not jerks and they're not mean. They're just busy. Like I'll email them, be like, "Hey, you want to come on my podcast?" And sometimes they won't reply, and then I have to follow up, or I'll email them like, "Hey, can you come on this podcast?" And it takes a while to like figure out their schedule, and or sometimes it might take them a couple weeks to get back to my email. And like once they get on the podcast, they all have a great time. They're like, "Thank you for reading my book. Thank you for all these great questions. It was a great experience. Happy to talk again anytime." But the thing is, these people are super busy, and time is their most limited resource, and that's what you're asking for. So like you have to come prepared, and don't get offended if they don't reply to your email. It takes them a while to get back to you. Like these guys are super busy. They're super successful. You probably need them more than they need you, so just don't get mad at them for being busy. They're not jerks. They just, they have a lot of things going on.